There's an awful lot of facial expression happening, and it is clearly impacting a 14-year-old girl.
You're all being watched. Nothing that would be, in my opinion, an effort to influence the child in any way or make this more difficult will be tolerated, and it will be addressed rapidly. It's a legitimate concern, Mr. Gravely, and it will continue to be scrutinized.
Sadie Beacham and Zachariah Anderson were together for over a decade and had 3 children. In 2019, Sadie decided to end their relationship. Despite Zachariah's difficulty in coming to terms with their breakup, they maintained a peaceful co-parenting relationship for the sake of their children. It didn't take long for Zachariah to start a new relationship. In early 2020, Sadie found a new romantic partner as well, 40-year-old Rosalio Gutierrez Jr. Though it appeared that Zachariah had moved on, he hadn't, and he became jealous of Sadie's new relationship. He began spying on the couple, and it wasn't long before Sadie found out and confronted him, but to no avail. Sadie became increasingly anxious about Zachariah's jealous behavior, but would never have suspected the horror that was about to unfold. On March the 18th, 2020, Sadie stopped by Rosalio's apartment. Upon arrival, she noticed his patio door had been left open. She went inside and found blood spanning from the ceiling down to the floor. With all of the blood in the apartment and no trace of Rosalio's location, police suspected the worst. What could have occurred inside Rosalio's apartment to cause such a gruesome scene? And did Zachariah have anything to do with it? Before we begin, we would like to send our sincere condolences to the loved ones of Rosalio Gutierrez Jr., who fell victim to the abominable acts described in this case.
A mother of a missing Kenosha man has traveled over 1,000 miles to find answers in her son's disappearance case.
Rosalio Gutierrez was last seen 4 months ago today. His mother sat down with our Aaron Maben to discuss her quest for closure.
Today's 4 months, 123 days.
Not a day goes by
He was very loving, a jokester.
where Celia Patterson doesn't think about her son, Rosalio Gutierrez Jr.
I go to bed every night hoping to dream with my son, and he doesn't come to me in my dreams. I pray every day that he's found.
The 40-year-old father of 2 was last seen May 17th. During the suspicious disappearance investigation, authorities found a large amount of blood inside his apartment.
Do you think he's alive today?
No. My son was assaulted and murdered on the evening of Sunday, May 17, 2020. There's no doubt in my mind that my son was taken from his apartment dead.
Police have not revealed what they believe happened. Court records show Zachariah Anderson faces stalking charges in connection to the disappearance case. Prosecutors say Anderson stalked his ex-girlfriend who was dating Gutierrez. Patterson would not say if she thinks the 40-year-old who denies involvement played a role.
I'm not going to answer that, okay, because it's an open investigation.
Patterson has temporarily left her home in Colorado to spend time in Kenosha.
I'm here to be close to my son, to his investigation, and to my grandchildren.
She hopes someone can soon share information to help crack the case.
There's a few individuals out there who know where my son is. They know what was done with my boy.
Every year, nearly 13.5 million people in the United States are subjected to stalking. This fact implies that 1 out of every 3 women and 1 out of every 6 men had a stalker at some point in their life. In most cases, the stalker is a previous intimate partner of the victim, and intimate stalkers have a greater chance of becoming violent. Rosalio Gutierrez Jr. lived in an apartment complex in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Like Sadie, he had children from a previous relationship, a young boy and a girl. Rosalio was a real estate investor at the Tranquility Property Group. He met Sadie through a dating page. The relationship moved slowly, with Sadie keeping her romantic life separate from her children. They chatted online for a while and eventually began spending some time together in person. The day before Sadie's daughter's 12th birthday party, she invited Rosalio over to help decorate for the party and to have dinner. It was late by the time they finished, so they decided that Rosalio would spend the night. On May 16th, Sadie spent the evening with him and his children having a movie night. She had no way of knowing that this would be the last time she would ever see Rosalio again. 40-year-old Zachariah Anderson lived in Macon, Wisconsin, about an hour's drive from Kenosha. He had a construction job working on residential homes and owned a tree farm in Saukville, Wisconsin, about 25 minutes north of Macon. Sadie ended her long-term relationship with Zachariah in early 2019. In Sadie's words, their relationship had become tumultuous and was a relationship on its way out. When Sadie spoke with Zachariah about ending the relationship, she felt uneasy about letting him inside her home. Instead, she stood outside in her driveway and spoke with him. Together, they worked out a custody agreement they believed was best for the kids. Unhappy with the overall situation, Zachariah would spend the rest of the year in and out of contact with Sadie. It would become commonplace for him to fall off the face of the earth for a couple of weeks and then pop back up again. Even though Zachariah was unhappy about losing his relationship with Sadie, in a short period of time he began seeing someone new, a woman named Christine Remsburg. It seemed as though Zachariah had finally moved on. In February of 2020, Sadie began her relationship with Rosalio, something she shared only with her close friends. Somehow, Zachariah found out. It quickly became apparent, however, that he had not moved on, and he was not ready to let Sadie move on either. He began trying to win back Sadie. It started with constant text messages and phone calls about how they should have given their relationship more time. Zachariah also sent her the occasional bouquet of flowers. But that wasn't enough. Zachariah made it his mission to discover everything he could about his competitor. This included dragging his daughter out late one night to spy on them, the night before her 12th birthday. Zachariah had all 3 children that night. He brought Olivia with him and left the 2 boys at home alone. Once outside Sadie's living room window, Zachariah and Olivia spied on the couple. Olivia watched, angry and confused, as her mother sat close to a man that wasn't her father. Before the night was over, Zachariah gave Olivia a cell phone, instructing her to record her mother anytime she looked upset. It was about 2:30 in the morning by the time Sadie and Rosalio finished decorating and eating dinner, so they headed off to bed. After Sadie and Rosalio had gone to bed, the front doorbell rang, a very unusual time for someone to show up at their home. The couple went to investigate, but found no one at the door. Sadie peered out of the blinds of their bedroom window and noticed a black car pass by. Although Sadie couldn't see the driver or make out the distinctive features of the car besides the color, she couldn't help but wonder if that was the person who was just at her door, and possibly it was Zachariah, who happened to own a black car. Sadie expressed her suspicions to Rosalio before going back to bed. In the morning, Rosalio went out to his truck and found the contents of his glove box on the center console. Immediately, they concluded that Zach must have broken into their vehicle. In a rush to make it to Olivia's party at Zachariah's house, Sadie and Rosalio decided to discuss the situation further at a later time. While at the party, Sadie noticed Olivia was giving her the cold shoulder, refusing to show Sadie any signs of affection and spending most of the time at the party avoiding her. Sadie couldn't help but wonder if Olivia somehow knew she had spent the night with another man. As the party was coming to an end and Sadie was preparing to take her children back to her house to have the party they had planned for Olivia, her daughter asked an unexpected question. Olivia asked if her dad and his family could come over to their house for the second party. Hesitantly, Sadie agreed, but under the condition that Zach's family stayed outside on the deck because she did not feel comfortable having him inside their home. To accommodate Olivia's request, Sadie moved the party out onto the deck where they opened presents and ate cake. After the party, Olivia requested to go back to her dad's house. Though confused, Sadie gave her okay. Nearing the end of the party, Zach tried to talk Sadie into letting him stay behind because he wanted to speak to her privately. Highly uncomfortable with the idea of being left alone with Zach, she told him that if he wants to talk, he was going to have to do it while his family was present. Everyone began to leave, and Zach paused at the door. He told Sadie that he had a premonition that she was with another man last night. He was able to describe to Sadie what she was wearing and the song she was listening to. Then he began badgering her to confess that she had been with someone else. Not believing for a moment that Zach had all of this information from a premonition, she flat out told him the only way he could know any of those details would be if he was at her house last night, which he of course denied. They continued to stand in the doorway and argue about it until, exasperated, Zachariah began to walk away. He then paused, and with a look of remembrance, he told Sadie the man that she was with was a Mexican named Rosalio Gutierrez Jr., a name Sadie had never mentioned to him. Still in the doorway, Sadie stood there startled and terrified as Zach continued to reveal details about her new boyfriend, details which he could not have possibly known. Now, there was no doubt in Sadie's mind that Zach was at her house spying on her the night before, and she told him that. It took him a moment, but Zach finally walked back up to Sadie and admitted that he did go by their house, saying that he just needed to know if she was seeing someone else. Olivia had intended to do as Zachariah instructed and spy on her mom. However, her mother soon found the cell phone. Olivia confessed that she was asked to spy on her by her father. On the phone, Sadie found an app that showed Zachariah had purchased 2 GPS trackers with voice-activated recording features. A short time later, Sadie found the cell phone hidden in the car underneath one of the kids' booster seats. On May 17, 2020, Sadie sent messages to Rosalio like she always did. But despite her multiple attempts to contact him, Rosalio remained unresponsive. Sadie and Rosalio were good about contacting each other regularly, so his silence made Sadie a little nervous. She still had no luck contacting Rosalio by phone the following day. As the time ticked by, she became more and more anxious about Rosalio, worrying that something may have happened to him and wondering if Zachariah had done something drastic. On May the 19th, Sadie went to Rosalio's home to ensure that he was safe. That was when she found his patio door open, his apartment covered in blood. Immediately, she called the police. Police found blood spattered on the ceiling, walls, curtains, furniture, floor, and numerous household items. With the amount of blood found throughout the home, police did not believe that Rosalio made it out alive.
I remember being very afraid. Opened the screen and I pushed the blinds aside, and I immediately saw red blood. I had concerns that possibly Zach had done something.
Furniture had also been moved around, indicating signs of a struggle. Sadie informed the investigators that an area rug was missing as well. Following the trail of blood, investigators were able to piece together that the struggle began at the front door. Since there were no signs of forced entry, Rosalio must have opened the door, and the perpetrator attacked him soon after. It was obvious that Rosalio had been struck numerous times, but no murder weapon was found. Rosalio's vehicle was still sitting in the parking lot of the apartment building, untouched. Continuing their investigation at the apartment, police found Rosalio's cell phone, wallet, and ID. It had been stuffed in the back of his freezer. Sadie told the investigators she discovered that her ex-boyfriend, Zachariah, had been stalking her ever since he found out about her relationship with Rosalio. Police now had a primary suspect. On Tuesday, May the 19th, investigators had enough evidence to arrest Zachariah and search his home, minivan, and tree farm. That evening, Zachariah was home with his girlfriend. At this point, the two had been dating for about a year. They were sitting in the living room watching a movie when they heard the knock at the door. Zachariah opened it to find police standing outside with a warrant to search his property and another for his arrest. Records from Zachariah's phone show that he was in Kenosha at 9:34 p.m. on May the 13th, the day that Sadie was spending with Rosalio. A folder labeled Rosalio Gutierrez Jr. was discovered on Zachariah's laptop. It contained photographs of Rosalio, a map indicating the location of his apartment complex, where he worked, and more. In Zachariah's yard, a burn pit was found smoldering, although there had been heavy rain for the past 3 days. Police returned the next day with a cadaver dog to search the yard all over again. All they found were the remnants of a bleach bottle and bits of clothing that matched the clothes Zachariah was wearing the day he was arrested. More devastating evidence was discovered inside Zachariah's minivan. Inside the van, there was the strong smell of bleach, along with bleach stains. Additionally, the back seats were absent and a substantial portion of the carpet from the rear floor had been cut out. Investigators also came across a small spot of blood in the back of the minivan. DNA samples were run, and it turned out to be a match for Rosalio. Investigators continued their search at Zachariah's tree farm, where they found another burn pit containing more clothing remnants. On December 11, 2020, Zachariah Anderson was charged with felony counts of first-degree intentional homicide, hiding a corpse, and 2 counts of stalking. After spending over 3 years in prison, Zachariah entered the courtroom to begin his trial on February 28, 2023 in the Kenosha County Circuit Court. Since Rosalio's body was never discovered, the prosecution had to work hard to provide enough solid evidence against Zachariah to prove his guilt. The defense used it to their advantage and wasted no time creating a commotion in the courtroom by promoting their theory during their opening statement, which nearly led to a mistrial.
There will not be a mistrial in a Mequon man's homicide case after prosecutors and Zachariah Anderson's defense came to an agreement.
Bill Miston has the latest from Kenosha County.
At issue was an argument proposed by Anderson's defense during its opening statements that possibly someone else was responsible for the disappearance of Rosalio Gutierrez. He hasn't been seen or heard from since May 2020.
What did I do in my life to merit such congenial attorneys?
The jury trial of Zachariah Anderson is back on.
We've come up with a joint proposed cautionary instruction
For the jury to disregard what was said by the defense in its opening statement.
So there was kind of that mutual understanding that it could be seen both ways. So what did they ignore? They ignored Miss Beacham.
The defense's theory is the police investigation was shoddy. During its opening statement, the defense said police never looked at Anderson's ex as a possible suspect, pointing to a text sent by her friend days before Gutierrez disappeared. The state wanted a mistrial, as a third-party defense theory falls under the Denny rule. That requires pretrial hearings to show motive, opportunity, and direct connection to be allowed in.
But just because it's a rule doesn't mean it's a good one.
UW Law School professor Ian Main says prosecutors don't have to show motive to bring a case.
But defense has to show. Well, that creates a bit of disconnect between this sense of right to present your defense and then these kind of requirements that you don't even put on the state.
And called the move by the defense strategic.
And then the judge reinforcing that through the curative instruction. Just in case you missed it, jury, disregard this important thing. It's not important.
After the trial began, prosecutors brought in one of the officers from the crime scene to testify about the blood found across Rosalio's apartment, showing the jury photos of the large blood stains and spatter.
Kenosha officer Jeff Van Wee, who says he saw blood evidence in Rosalio Gutierrez's apartment.
I walked inside the hallway, and on apartment 1B, I saw dried red fluid stains all on the door itself and around the door.
Much of Monday's testimony focused on blood stains and spatter. Investigators captured blood on the ceiling, door, and covering his living room.
What sort of object causes that sort of blood spatter?
It's either blunt force trauma or gunshots.
Prosecutors believe Anderson drove to Gutierrez's apartment, killed him, and destroyed the evidence in May 2020. At the time, Gutierrez was dating Anderson's ex and the mother of his children. Nobody has found Gutierrez's body.
On March 3rd, the fourth day of the trial, the prosecution brought in Christine Remsburg. The woman had been Zachariah's girlfriend for a year prior to his arrest and who was with him the night he was arrested. These questions were used in an attempt to create a timeline of the murder.
When the defendant was arrested, did law enforcement then also speak to you?
Yes, the same night he was arrested.
Okay. And did they want to know about the previous Sunday, so 2 days earlier, 2 nights earlier?
Yes.
They were kind of focused on that, weren't they?
Yes.
And what did you originally tell them that you believed was the whereabouts of the defendant on the evening of May 17th, which would be that Sunday? What did you originally tell them?
What I originally told him is that he was over, but like I told them when they look on my phone, it says on my way, he was over. If it doesn't, he wasn't there that day.
So originally you said you thought he was over there?
Yes, originally that's what I said, yeah.
And at some point did you share phone evidence with law enforcement?
Yes.
Okay. Did you receive a text from Zachariah Anderson's phone to you on your phone at 4:57 p.m. on Sunday, the 17th of May, where he says cool?
Yeah.
Okay. And then at 6:35 p.m., do you text the defendant's phone and suggest to him you got a movie in mind?
Yes.
And so, does that text? Is that a text you sent him?
Yes.
Okay. And with that, so you don't have to read it. Does the text? Is that all right if I just read it, as opposed to making her read it?
Fine.
Okay. Does the text at 6:35 p.m. to the defendant say from you, Alice in Wonderland, Land 1933, gotta find it and watch it, it's my new mission M. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a movie that you're discussing?
Yeah.
And are you expecting the defendant at that time to still show up at your house?
Possibly, yes.
Okay. I mean, you had plans with him, did you not?
Yes.
Okay. And so you are suggesting for our movie night, here's what I'm thinking. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Any response from him at that time?
No.
Okay. Now I'm at 9:20 p.m. Up to then, have you received any texts from him or calls from him since you told him, hey, the movie's Alice in Wonderland? Has there been any, has he been in touch with you in any way? Okay. So now at 9:20 p.m., you text him and you say, get to keep kiddos tonight? Is that true? Did you text that?
Yeah.
And you're at 9:20 p.m., right? When you send that, 9:20 p.m.? Okay. Still no response until the next time you text at 10:31?
Correct.
Okay. At 10:31 p.m., or 10:31:09, do you text the defendant, whatever, going to bed?
Yes.
Okay. Fair to say you're not happy at that point?
Yes.
Okay. And is the first time you hear from the defendant a text from him that says, fell asleep, sorry, missed afternoon nap? Is that what he said?
Yes.
Okay. What, if anything, can you say about later whether you got a call from him?
Yes, I don't remember the whole phone conversation, what it was about, but usually we just talk about our day or how we feel and what's going on.
All right. And did he ever arrive at your home that night?
That night, no.
On the next day, so Monday morning, were you again texting back and forth with the defendant?
Yes.
Okay. And so I'll ask you if you recognize this text. Just for purposes of you not having to approach, I'm going to read you the content of the text again.
Okay.
It's going to be a long day, still haven't got to work, hit you up later, babe. Is that a text you received from the defendant's phone on a time period that is noted as 8:54 a.m.? Is that a time you received that text?
Yes.
Okay. So when the defendant texted you and said, I've had a nap, and so that's why I haven't answered any of your texts, you don't know for sure if he had a nap. Did you know one way or another whether he was taking a nap when he texted you or had been?
How could I? I was at home.
Okay. And when you received the 8:52 text indicating that the defendant had not yet arrived at work, you had no idea where he was, did you?
Absolutely.
On that Monday, when after the text that said, I'm not at work yet, do you recall when the first time you saw the defendant was on the 18th? Like, what time did you first meet up with him in any place? Your place, his place on the 18th?
Was that Tuesday?
It was a Monday?
Tuesday.
So, what?
Was it Tuesday?
It was a Monday. Only if you know.
I don't remember. I just know on Tuesday is the movie night and I was over there around 7.
Do you remember telling law enforcement that on May 18th, you went to his home about 6 p.m.? So that would be the Monday that you also went to.
I'm just confusing dates. Okay.
Did
yes,
you do that on
was Monday.
On Monday?
Yes.
But were you also there on Tuesday, the day he was arrested?
Yeah.
Once the prosecution had finished, the defense asked their line of questioning to Remsburg, trying to disprove multiple factors in the case. First, they worked to undo the potential timeline prosecution had been trying to create.
So I want to go back a little bit. The state had been talking to you about the first statement you gave law enforcement on the 19th, and then the second time you talked to them 2 days later. You had told law enforcement on the 19th that you had memory problems, and that's why it would probably be better to ask your sister, right?
I didn't specifically say that I have memory problems, no, but considering me and my sister lived together, and I was going back to work, and I do have shit drinks, so no, I'm not good at remembering dates, but knowing my routine, and that was what I told the authorities.
So, but when you told them that, it was because you weren't 100% sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Because usually he was over there. The only time that he wasn't over there, either we were working or he was with his kids.
And so then on the 21st, which was 2 days after you first spoke with law enforcement, you told them after seeing more information that he was not at the house on the 17th, correct?
Correct. And when I got asked and I thought he was there, I even had them look at my phone. So for them to say that I lied or I was covering up and harass me about it is not right. It's not okay.
Because you weren't covering anything up, correct?
No, I was just going by memory. I got hit that my boyfriend's in some kind of trouble. I asked the captain what's going on, and he couldn't even tell me. I didn't know until later on at all, nothing. And everybody feels like they're attacking me from authorities from this way, and this is going on. No one really cares about what I go through. I didn't want to come back here because of the harassment I've been through. And I'm here.
And it's because law enforcement never really wanted to hear your story, right?
Exactly.
You felt like they were pressuring you into what they wanted you to say.
I just felt they were thinking I was hiding something, pulling something when there was nothing there to pull.
When you spoke with Mr. Anderson on May 17th, 2019, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
And the text messages before that the state had read to you about Mr. Anderson taking a nap, you remember receiving that text?
Yes.
And you said you had been dating Mr. Anderson for about a year?
Yes.
And during that year, I'm assuming you've known Mr. Anderson to sleep.
Yes.
And were there times where he would also nap?
Yes.
So receiving a text that he was napping, that wasn't anything out of the ordinary from your experience?
No.
And it's true, too, that during your entire relationship, there were times where perhaps you had planned on meeting up, but then that didn't happen because something else came up.
Yes.
Like he had sometimes Mr. Anderson would have his kids.
Yes, the schedule would change with the kids often.
And sometimes he would be tired from work.
Absolutely.
So it wasn't bizarre that he wasn't able to come over that evening.
Judge, again, this is propensity evidence and it's an argument.
It's actually a follow-up of the state's questioning of her.
Objections overruled.
You can answer that question if you remember.
Could you repeat it?
Yeah, of course. I said that there was nothing bizarre then on the 17th about him not coming over because he had fallen asleep.
No, it's not bizarre, no.
The phone call that you had with Mr. Anderson the evening of May 17th, 2020, there was nothing suspicious about that phone call, correct?
No. I would have remembered something otherwise. To me, it was just a normal phone call. I don't remember exactly what we talked about even then. It's usually around the same thing. It was nothing I need to put on the schedule, so why would I?
And then you spoke with him, and then the next morning he texted you that you texted him, and then he texted you back that he was heading to work, right?
Yes.
And was that normal from your observations of Mr. Anderson that he would go to work in the mornings?
Yes.
And you were aware that Mr. Anderson was doing construction contracting work at a home up in Belgium, Wisconsin?
Yes.
And your understanding, where was Mr. Anderson going to work on that morning when he texts you?
I'm not really sure, because the boys always did side work, and that's the boys' thing, you know.
Had with Mr. Anderson the evening of May 17th, 2020, there was nothing suspicious about that phone call, correct?
No, I would have remembered something otherwise. To me, it was just a normal phone call. I don't remember exactly what we talked about even then. It's usually around the same thing. It was nothing I need to put on the schedule, so why would I?
And then you spoke with him, and then the next morning he texted you that you texted him, and then he texted you back that he was heading to work, right?
Yes.
And was that normal from your observations of Mr. Anderson that he would go to work in the mornings?
Yes.
And you were aware that Mr. Anderson was doing construction contracting work at a home up in Belgium, Wisconsin?
Yes.
And your understanding, where was Mr. Anderson going to work on that morning when he texts you?
I'm not really sure, because the boys always did side work, and that's the boys' thing, you know.
The defense tried to prove that Zachariah couldn't pick up and carry a body because he suffered from chronic back pain.
While you dated Mr. Anderson for the year, did you know him to have any sort of injuries?
Like what type of allergies are you talking about?
Like any sort of things that would prohibit him from moving around freely, any back problems, leg problems, anything of that sort?
He has back problems.
Okay, can you explain what you know of those back problems?
Sometimes he just can't move. He either has to lay there or he has to stand up and just keep doing stuff. It's serious pain enough to where you hold your back and you can't move.
Frequently, did Mr. Anderson experience back pain and issues?
It was daily. Sometimes it was worse. Sometimes some days were better.
And do you remember if there was anything that would cause him to have back pain?
Heavy lifting that he would end up doing.
Okay. And to your knowledge, was it hard for Mr. Anderson to do heavy lifting because of his back issues?
Yes.
So you had gone over to Mr. Anderson's house from May 18th and on May 18th and May 19th?
May 18th and May 19th, you said?
Yeah.
Yes.
And when you were there, Mr. Anderson, was he with you?
Yes.
And you never saw Mr. Anderson with bloody clothes, correct?
No.
And did you ever see him getting rid of what appeared to be some sort of evidence?
No.
On March the 9th, 8 days into the trial, prosecutors brought in Zachariah's cellmate, Marquand Washington, who claimed that Zachariah had confessed to the murder. The prosecution claimed that Washington and Zachariah bonded over their shared entrepreneurial spirit, both growing and selling marijuana, a fact the prosecution used to bolster the credibility of their jailhouse informant.
Zachariah Anderson's former cellmate, Marquand Washington, described a night when Anderson had a nightmare.
I was laying there, and I was reading my book, and I heard him shout in his sleep.
Washington says he asked Anderson about his case.
He said, "Die, die, die."
Anderson is accused of stalking and killing his ex-girlfriend's new boyfriend, Rosalio Gutierrez, in May 2020.
I told him to look me in my eyes and tell me that you didn't do it. And he jumped down from the bed and he looked me in my eyes and he said, "I did it." He said, "That's the reason I have the nightmares."
Kenosha County District Attorney Michael Gravely asked about a nickname Anderson was called in prison.
He said they called him Houdini because of his case, basically because he made a body disappear, they say, and everybody called him Houdini because of it.
Gutierrez's body is still missing. Washington testified that Anderson told him about the murder.
He had seen this person, and he said he stabbed him, and he blacked out.
And what happened to the body.
And he said he eventually wrapped the body up in garbage bags and got rid of the trash. He threw the trash out. Okay. And I asked him, what did he mean by that? And he said, I said, what, like dumpster or trash? And he said, once it's gone, it's gone.
Though the evidence proved that Zachariah was in the weed business, the judge clearly stated this fact should not be held against his character or affect the trial. Still, some believe that such a tactic will further tarnish the defendant and help the prosecution gain an upper hand.
There's so many different ways to use evidence. There are a lot of tools and pathways good creative lawyers such as the state are going to use to bring this stuff in. The state, of course, is hoping that associating this family with a marijuana grow operation that may have been illegal at the law, under the law at that time is going to harm and throw some shade on the defendant. But we've discussed it. Marijuana has changed so much over the last 5, 10, 15 years, especially in our western states. We don't believe that's going to be some sort of a stain on the character of death.
My problem with is, you know what, the reason the prosecutor really wants this, once a scumbag, always a scumbag. Come on, that's the reason you do. And then what you get is the judge saying, by the way, you can't talk about character, you can't think about character, don't think about character, make sure you're not thinking character. What are you thinking about? Character.
Yeah.
I'm shocked.
And,
oh yeah, okay.
And that's the problem, is it's disingenuous, and the question's whether the defense is going to be able to show the state's being disingenuous, throwing the shade on the defendant. Y'all know that that's not what this case is about. This is the state trying to bully, use all their tools, and some of them are off-putting. Jurors don't like seeing the state take undue advantage.
On March the 14th, 10 days into the trial, the prosecution brought in video recordings of Zachariah making a peculiar purchase at Walmart the day after the suspected murder of Rosalio.
In a case that cuts across counties, Tuesday centered around this Ozaukee County store.
It is a receipt for several purchases from a Saukville area Walmart.
It was pouring rain the morning of May 18th, 2020, when Zachariah Anderson walked in, picked out some items, and paid in cash.
What items were purchased per this transaction?
There were a few items, Q-tips, Old Spice, and a shaver. There was also garbage bags. There was some Playtex gloves.
How many containers, or how many of those boxes?
2 packages of large gloves. There was three containers of sardines, and there was 2 containers of Clorox wipes.
This, prosecutors say, was what Anderson used to clean up evidence of the crime.
The prosecution also called Sadie's best friend of 30 years, Rebecca Jekyll, to testify about a highly uncomfortable confrontation she had with Zachariah on March the 5th of 2020. On this day, she was babysitting the kids for Sadie, who was on vacation in Mexico.
I know that other friends of hers had been looking at going on a trip down to Mexico, and that she had the opportunity to go, and that she was thinking about going.
And what month would that have been in, if you can recall?
The trip was at the beginning of March 2020.
And what, if any, role were you going to be playing in her ability to go on this trip in March of 2020?
She had asked me if I would be able to possibly help out with the kids for a couple of nights while she was gone.
And what was the plan concerning you watching the children?
Well, they were in daycare at the time. I think the boys were, and I think their daughter, it was COVID, so I don't know where they were during the day, but I was at work. And then I would be there for the kids in the evening for dinner, bedtime, and then get them off to where they needed to be in the morning before I went to work. And it was Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday I was going to have the kids go with her stepmom and dad.
And what was the plan, to your knowledge, of whether or not the defendant was supposed to be present for any of that?
He was not going to be. He was actually out of state, was my understanding.
So I'm going to direct your attention to the early morning hours of March 5th of 2020. Do you recall something that caused you concern on that morning?
Yeah.
And what was that?
I had fallen asleep in the living room on the couch, and when I had woke up, the lights were off. I think the TV was in sleep mode, and I saw a dark figure at the end of the couch. And then when I don't know if I moved or made a sound or whatnot, but where my feet were, there was...
Judge, I'm going to object on the grounds of relevance and other acts. And if this needs to be argued further, I'd like it to be outside the presence of the jury.
The defendant was standing at the end of the couch, just smiling at me and said, "Hey there." And I didn't really even know what to say. And so then he said, "Where the fuck are my kids and their whore mother?" And he went upstairs and woke up the kids.
And do you recall roughly what time of morning this was?
It was about 3:45 in the morning.
And where were you staying that night that the defendant was in the living room?
In Sadie's home.
And to your knowledge, did the defendant live there?
No, he did not.
To your knowledge, was he supposed to be there?
No.
After the defendant went upstairs to wake up the children, what do you recall happening next?
He came back down with the kids and stood there and started asking me. He's actually had told me that he was surprised I was there because he thought I was be down in Mexico whoring with her when he saw my Jeep in the driveway. And then he asked me again who she was with, and I told him the people who he also knows. And he told me not to lie and that he knows she's fucking somebody whose name starts with an L.
Now, at this point, given your friendship with Miss Beacham, are you aware of anyone in her life at that point whose name or nickname started with an L?
Yeah.
And who is that?
Rosalio. We actually called him Leo because when she first told me his name, I'm kind of hard of hearing, and so I was like, I didn't understand what she said, so we started, made a joke that we would call him Leo, and that's, for a while, that's how she referred to him whenever she would speak to me about him. Saddie, and 911 was called, and he was in the kitchen making breakfast and telling them to hurry up and eat because Auntie Becky says, I'm a bad man and the cops are coming.
And was this still roughly around 4 a.m.?
It was around, yeah, I mean, when I looked at the clock, it was about, for the first time that I remember looking, it was about 3:45 in the morning, according to the clock in the living room.
And who had been the one to call 911?
Sadie did.
And why, in your understanding, was that done?
Because I contacted her and I let her
know.
know.
No object as far as speculation as to why Miss Beacham called 911.
Your Honor, I believe she's saying what she stated to Miss Beacham, which I believe she will then represent as why she believes 911 was called. It's all about her statements to Miss Beacham.
So I had contacted her and I just said, what the hell, Zach is here? Like, what is he doing here? And I didn't know what to do. I was terrified. I didn't know why he was there. My understanding, he wasn't supposed to be there. And she proceeded to call 911 because if she hadn't, I told her I would.
At first, it sounds like a case of breaking and entering. However, during cross-examination, we learned that that was not the case.
Was there some sort of protective order that you were aware of that Mr. Anderson could not see his children?
No.
You had mentioned on direct examination that there were times where Mr. Anderson would go radio silent.
Yes.
Can you explain what you meant by that?
It's a term like he literally would just completely not speak to her, not contact her, and then out of nowhere.
The prosecution also questioned Jekyll regarding her knowledge of Sadie and Zachariah's relationship and any allegations Sadie had made about Zachariah stalking her.
She would just, the text messages, constant text messages and emails, showing up in places or just sometimes he would go radio silent and then out of nowhere just send her really random messages, just very, I don't even know how to explain it. It was just a lot of instances that she had told me about of weird things happening, and then him kind of confirming it to her when she would call him out on it.
And at any point in April and May of 2020, did Miss Beacham indicate to you any interest in rekindling her relationship with the defendant?
No.
And how would you describe the trajectory of Miss Beacham's relationship with Leo during those same months? Were they still seeing each other? How was that going?
They were still talking. She seemed very happy, excited.
Seemingly is making you emotional. Why are you emotional over that sentiment that you just shared with us?
Objection relevance.
Your Honor, it goes directly to the
It's
motion.
commenting on her emotional state on the witness stand.
The objection is overruled.
Why does that make you emotional?
Because she deserved it. I wanted to see her happy. I wanted to see her in something that was good for her, you know? She's my best friend, and it was nice to see her truly, genuinely smile about someone who was treating her well.
Had it been a while since you'd seen her that happy?
I'm sorry, what?
Had it been a while since you'd seen her that happy?
It had been.
I'm going to object to relevance.
Sustained.
At some point during April, May of 2020, did Miss Beacham share fears with you that she was being tracked by the defendant?
She did.
And what in general do you remember regarding those conversations with Miss Beacham?
There were a couple instances where she had let me know about a time that she had found a phone in her vehicle after she had taken the kids over to Zach's house to drop them off for the night. She had let me know about, there was a time that he was sending her messages about where she was headed and what she was doing. There was instances where he was sending her messages and she had told me that it was basically word for word of something that her and Leo were talking about while in his living room. And then she had gotten a message from him almost immediately after, word for word on what Leo had said to her.
And so I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 283. Miss Beacham, to you, he's hacking into my phone or something. Liv just told me he hacked into her school Chromebook. And then she says, I can't prove it is the problem. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And you respond with, well, this is where Olivia needs to stand up and tell the police these things and they can look into it. Is that from you?
Yes.
Okay, and then a minute later, is there a text from you that says, phone call has been placed, and then a text, all I was told is it will be again, and you will not know when, where, or how. Call me in 1 week, and then a minute later, it will begin?
Yeah.
What is that text string from you about regarding phone call has been placed? Who did you call?
My son.
And back in May of 2020, how old was your son?
18.
And why did you call your son at that moment?
Because he was 18 and he knows a lot about different applications and telephones and things like that. And I had asked him if there was anything we could put on her phone that would show that maybe that he had put something on her phone, but a way that he wouldn't know it was on her phone in order to prove that he was doing the things he was doing to her.
When you say things on her phone, whose phone were you hoping to find some application for?
Sadie's.
And why did you think perhaps your son would be able to assist with this?
Because like I said, he's, he was young, and they're very privy, and a good friend of his also, they're big into the video games and the software and things like that, and just had asked if they knew of anything that they could do to prove what was happening.
And ultimately, after calling your son and making that request of him, was anything able to be done in regards to helping out Ms. Beacham regarding potential software on her phone?
No, because he had told me that a friend of his...
I'm going to object to hearsay as to what her son said.
The prosecution goes on to ask Jekyll about the text conversations she had with Sadie the day Rosalio was discovered to be missing. Sadie happened to be speaking with Jekyll the very moment that she discovered the horrifying scene in Rosalio's apartment.
Was it unusual that there would be large periods of time where Leo would not be in contact with her?
I'm sorry, can you ask that again?
Sure. In knowing Ms. Beacham as you do, in her relationship with Leo, was it unusual that Leo would not be in contact with her for a large period of time?
It was unusual for him to not contact her.
That scares me. Have you let Leo know that you just want him to check in? And then you also responded 3:37, I wonder if he got his mail yet. Is that accurate?
Yes.
When you respond with, I wonder if he got his mail yet, what are you referring to?
I don't even remember.
Okay. So moving on to the next message at 3:37, yep, and no word. And you respond back with, has he been active on Facebook at all? And she says back, dunno, I'm a little sick. Leo usually checks in, or I guess on me. And nope, not since yesterday. He texts saying he just dropped off his kid and was going to his buddy's house. And then she says, thinking maybe he forgot his phone there or something. I don't know, kind of weird though. And you then respond with, okay, so hopefully he just forgot his phone. Do you think Zach would do some shit? She says, dunno, he's capable of anything. And you said, right, that is just it. Did you mail that shit? And she said, yes, it was expected to arrive today. Do you know what she had mailed?
I don't know, but I know at that time she was talking about mailing.
I'm going to object to speculation. She just said she didn't know.
The objection is sustained.
And then you say, oh boy, well, whatever you do, please keep in contact with me, even just a hi, if I text you through the night. All accurate?
Yes.
And that was in concerns to not hearing from Leo that day?
Yes.
To voicemail, and you respond with Leo ? All accurate?
Yes.
She then says, yep. And then you ask, was he upset with you? When you ask, was he upset with you, were you referring to?
Leo.
And then you ask, what about Nutcase? Hear from him at all? When you say, what about Nutcase, who are you referring to?
Zach.
And does she respond back with, Zach sent me a text about an hour ago of a license plate that said got twins, weird, and then Leo didn't seem upset about anything? Is that all accurate?
Yes.
And then you respond with, yeah, very. Maybe he just left his phone and it died through day. You know, if you have receipt from certified letter, you can see if they attempted or made delivery. And
would you stop for just a moment, please? I'm going to ask the jurors to step out for just 2 minutes.
Just with the fact that she thought he was tracing or whatever, had something on her phone to be able to tell what her conversations were, and because of the fact that there had been an incident a few weeks earlier that took place at her house that was directly affecting Leo.
And then when you respond back at 6:14, you respond, I just hate the fact that because Zach is so goddamn twisted that your brain has to even go there. What did you mean by that?
Judge, I'm sorry, I'm going to object to relevance. There's not a charge with Miss Jekyll here. Why she felt a certain way about Mr. Anderson is completely irrelevant.
My anxiety is soaring right now. And you respond with, maybe you should drive there. And IDK, I don't know, have you called again? Not all accurate?
Yes.
And did she then say, I did call and I really want to? And you asked, did it ring or go straight to voicemail? Is that accurate?
Yes.
she says VM, accurate?
Yes.
And you say, she then responds, he would gotten another phone if it was broken or lost. And then she says, I think Zach has something to do with this. Somehow it is...
Judge, I'm sorry. I'm going to object at this point on the grounds that none of these text messages were covered with Ms. Beacham. Why a text message string now with hearsay components with this particular witness is relevant to the case is a stretch.
Does she text you at 7:58 a.m.? I'm so fucking sick right now, want to go for a ride. Did she text you that?
She did.
And what was that referencing in terms of your guys' conversation, as it looks like then you have a phone call right after that?
She wanted to drive down to Leo's house because she hadn't heard from him at that point.
And were you able to ride down with her to Kenosha to check in on Leo?
I was not.
And why not?
I had a meeting at work that afternoon in Brown Deer.
But as the morning progresses, do you stay in phone contact with Ms. Beacham?
Yeah, I did.
And while you're in phone contact with her, what is she doing?
Objection, speculation as to what Ms. Beacham's doing.
So, I guess the only way I can describe that I knew there was something wrong is I heard the most guttural sound I've ever heard come from a human being. And I was talking to her, and she had said both his vehicles were in the parking lot, and she said she was going to go to the door and just see if he was there. And then I heard her make a sound that I'd never heard come from a human before, and she said, there's blood all over. And I told her to hang up the phone and call 911 and get in her fucking car. Those were my words.
And ultimately, did she do that, to your knowledge? Did she hang up?
She
with
hung
you?
up, and then I heard back from her again after. But I don't really recall the sequence, whether it was text message, phone calls, whatever. It was a whirlwind.
March the 15th marked the 11th day of the trial, and it turned out to be a rather eventful day in the courtroom. On this day, Olivia, now 15, testified against her father. Olivia admitted that her dad had provided her with the cell phone and asked her to spy on Sadie, who later discovered the phone. Olivia also recounted the night before her birthday when her dad drove them over to her mom's house, where they stood outside spying on Sadie and Rosalio.
Arrived at the house, and we pulled into the parking, our driveway, of course, and he said to me, no, we're not going to park here, and he backed out. And then he went into the bar parking lot, and there's ones that are in the back, and they're closest to the house, and he gets out.
When you say he, who do you mean?
Zachariah Anderson.
Then what happened?
He jumps onto the porch and looks through my mom's window with a camera.
Let me stop you. When you said jumps onto the porch, of what location?
My mom's.
And when you said he, who did you mean jumped on the porch?
Zachariah Anderson.
Then what happened?
And then he is looking through the window, recording with not a camera, like a phone recorder, but a handheld recorder.
Okay. Then what happened next?
Comes down eventually after a little bit, puts another phone into the air conditioner.
Okay, stop. Let me stop you. The air conditioner is located where?
On the side of the house that I was on.
Okay, why would, so the air conditioner is connected to what room of the house, if you know?
My mom's room.
Okay, and when you say puts it in the air conditioner, tell me more what you mean by that.
There was like an opening, so coming out from looking on the outside of the house, there was the air conditioner coming out, and there was like a space around it. And it had insulation in there, like cushioning insulation, and the phone was put back far enough to see if there could be a recording of something.
And could you see that from where you were located?
Yes.
Okay, and where were you located when that was happening, when your dad was placing a phone recording device in the ventilation there?
I was sitting in the car.
Then what happened next?
And then he came to the car and asked me if I would like to see, and I said yeah.
Okay, who's he?
My dad.
Okay. I'm going to refer to that individual as the defendant, just for purposes of our discussion.
Sure.
So, okay, so when the defendant came and back to the car, what happened next?
I said sure.
Okay.
And I went up with him, and we went to the window. We walked around the balcony this time, and we went up the stairs, and we went to the window. And he looks at me and he says, before you do anything, go like this with your shirt to make sure that you don't get the breath marks on the window.
So I'd just like to have the record reflect that the witness, Your Honor, pulled their shirt up, blocking their ability to sort of breathe on objects, covering their nose and mouth.
Her, yes.
Okay. So then after you were advised of that by the defendant, what's the next thing that happened?
I saw I don't know how to refer to him.
Whatever you're comfortable.
Mr. Gutierrez, I guess.
Okay.
And I saw him sitting on the couch with my mother coming out of the bathroom. And I didn't think that it was gonna be this hard. They were listening to music and laying there together.
And doing what together?
Just laying there on the couch.
Okay. So what room are you looking into from where your vantage point is?
The living room. There was a space in between the curtains.
Okay. And what window of your mom's place are you looking through to be able to see into the living room?
What do you mean by that?
Well, you're on the outside, correct?
Correct.
So which window? Is it a window that goes into the kitchen? Is it a window that looks directly in the living room? So what?
It's a window that looks directly in the living room.
Okay. And where is the defendant during that period of time?
Standing next to me. Okay.
And after you look in and see that, what is the next thing that happens?
We leave.
What? You leave?
We got back in the car and we were on our way out, and he didn't grab the voice recorder at first until he pulled out and pulled onto the road, and he stopped. He stopped right at the second entryway to our driveway and got out, took his sandals off, and went to the house.
So let me stop you. What footwear then was your?
He didn't have shoes on.
Okay, cool. Keep going.
He went into Mr. Gutierrez's car and took his registration and took a picture of his license plate.
Okay.
And
I'm sorry, you saw that from where you were in the car?
Yes, I personally saw that.
Then what happened?
And I saw him ring the doorbell, and then run back to the car and drive away.
Whose doorbell did he ring?
My mother's, but he also had grabbed the phone while he was somewhere in the time period from when he rang the doorbell, the phone was grabbed.
And which phone are you referring to now?
I'm the one that was placed in the air conditioner.
Okay. So after the defendant goes to Mr. Gutierrez's truck, takes a picture and takes an item out of the vehicle or takes registration, grabs back the phone, and he rings the doorbell, what does the defendant do next after he does those three things?
Comes back to the car with the phone.
All right. And then what happens?
Plays the phone.
Okay.
Of course, plays a recording on our way home.
Okay. And what, if anything, can you say about what you could hear on that phone recording?
Nothing.
Okay. So where do you guys go next?
Back to my dad's house.
Okay. When you get back, what happens next?
I walk in. He tells me to get some sleep. I then was sitting downstairs and thinking about what just happened, because I was a little like, did I really just see what I saw? Would I just witnessed, and it was fine after that, I guess. And
so let me ask you, what did the defendant do next that you saw? So after you guys got home, what happened next, if anything?
he dropped me off and then he left again.
Okay. And you were not with him at that time?
No, I don't remember what time that was. We got back around 3 though.
As the prosecution continues to question Olivia, they finally get to Sunday, May the 17th. On this day, Olivia found a few things in her father's basement that were rather odd.
Did you have occasion to see anybody in your family playing with Legos in a location in the house?
Yes.
And what location in the house was that?
It was close to, like, around my dad's house.
Okay, and where in what area of your dad's house?
The downstairs.
Okay, so in the downstairs of your dad's house, who was playing Legos?
My brother.
And when your brother was playing Legos, did you end up in the same area as he was playing Legos?
Yeah.
Okay, and what, if anything, did you observe that you then told law enforcement about later?
Well, a Lego had dropped through the floorboards, and so Magnum had asked if he could go down there and look for it, and I said, yeah, that should be okay. And then I went down and, like, with him, obviously, because it was, I'm not gonna lie, the basement was kind of creepy. So he asked me if I could go with him. I said, yeah, so I went down there. There was a roller chair, whatever, and it had tape and rope on it, and my brother had a flashlight. We went down there, whatever, got his Lego, and went back upstairs. Didn't think anything of it.
So when you say roller chair, can you describe, like, where this kind of chair would be? And
like a black armchair.
Okay. Like a desk chair kind of thing? Okay. And then, other than the desk chair, were there other items down there that you then eventually wanted to tell or did decide to tell law enforcement about? What did you see there?
What do you quite mean?
Well, in relation to the chair, were there other items that you saw that were in the vicinity of the chair?
The tape and rope?
Okay, so what kind of tape are we talking about?
Like duct tape, just normal duct tape.
All right, and what kind of rope? Really thin or thick, or what do you remember about the rope?
It's like heavy duty, thick rope.
Okay, and do you remember what condition they were in? Were they old, new? What do you remember about it?
They weren't old.
Okay.
It didn't seem like they were old.
All right, and where were they located in relation to this chair that sounds like it's in the basement?
Yeah.
Okay, so where were they in relation to the chair, the desk chair you mentioned?
On them, like it was sitting on the seat.
Okay. And you last saw those supplies on May 17th on the Sunday before your mom picked you up?
Yes.
Multiple times, Zachariah can be seen physically communicating with his daughter while she was on the stand. But one particular moment between 11:30 and 11:32 a.m., while the prosecution was questioning Olivia about insults Zachariah would use in reference to Rosalio, caught the prosecutor's eye. The gesture was also noticed on CourtTV's recording and brought to the prosecution's attention, which was in turn brought to the court's attention.
There's an awful lot of facial expression happening, and it is clearly impacting a 14-year-old girl.
I have been watching both the defendant and the child's mother, and others. Everybody, you're all being watched. Nothing that would be, in my opinion, an effort to influence the child in any way or make this more difficult will be tolerated, and it will be addressed rapidly.
Some subtle communications from the witness to Mr. Anderson. Maybe there could be some instruction about that too.
She is looking over and getting smiles from the defendant.
My client has not prompted any of that behavior. She has been looking over here and has been looking at him and smiling, and that's been unprompted.
I can't see her face, and even if I turned on the TV, I wouldn't be able to see her face. I have noticed that she has looked both in the direction of her mother and her father, which I think is quite normal. I would encourage both anybody, but particularly the parents, to resist any effort of recognition. It's a legitimate concern, Mr. Gravely, and it will continue to be scrutinized.
The defense attempted to redirect the attention off of Zachariah's inappropriate signal to Olivia with accusations of their own. Supposedly, while Olivia was on the stand, members of Zachariah's family saw Sadie communicating with Olivia using sign language.
Ms. Beacham is apparently a certified in ASL, American Sign Language, and Olivia knows the language. And the observers that reported to us said that she was signing to her. I don't know what about. One thing that was mentioned was calm down. What else was signed to her? I don't know. And I have no idea if CourtTV would have picked any of that up. They certainly wouldn't have picked it up on Olivia's end, but I don't know if they picked any up on Sadie's end. So maybe if we're looking at some of this footage, we could look at that too.
Unlike Zachariah, no footage was caught of Sadie attempting to influence her daughter's testimony. Since there was no video evidence for them to fall back on, the judge allowed the defense attorneys to cross-examine either Sadie or Olivia on the issue. They chose Sadie.
But you know American Sign Language?
I do.
Okay. And you're fluent in it?
Fairly fluent, yes.
Okay. And you taught your daughter as a young child and as she grew up how to do it, right?
Up until about Olivia was about 2, she knew animals, her numbers, and her letters.
So the answer is yes. You did teach her.
I did.
And in fact, on your LinkedIn page, you list languages where they have a category for languages, and one of them is ASL, American Sign Language. Were you communicating with her in any other way without your hands, either facial expressions or whatever?
There was a moment where she got a little sassy up here, and my initial mom response was to go, shh, 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 shh. So if I did that, that would have been the only thing that I can recall I did.
Okay. And so to your recollection, your hands were below the level of the benches the whole time she was up here?
Correct.
Okay.
On March the 16th, now day 12 of the trial, the prosecution brought in a police officer who investigated the crime scene at Rosalio's apartment and participated in the investigation of Zachariah's home.
Accusations made by Ms. Beacham that she felt as though Mr. Anderson was listening in on her conversations and tracking them as well.
Police went to Zachariah Anderson's Mequon home and obtained a search warrant and later subpoenaed Amazon purchase records.
It was for 2 GPS tracker devices.
Purchased in the weeks before Gutierrez disappeared.
Next left onto 12th Street, Summers Road.
Police recovered turn-by-turn directions to Kenosha from Anderson's phone days before Gutierrez disappeared.
Well, they appear to be directions that would be possibly coming from, I guess, the north, coming into the Kenosha area.
When police did show up at that apartment on May 19th,
there was no immediate signs of forced entry. It was consistent with the appearance of blood that was on the wall, the door. The person from inside had opened that door to the outside.
Later that day at Anderson's home in Mequon, police found a number of items they believed were of interest.
How much cash was paid to the customer associated with this bank account?
$50,000.
Taken out 2 days before Gutierrez disappeared. And in a still smoldering fire pit, jean buttons, underwear, and what's believed to be remnants of steel-toed boots, suspected of being worn by Anderson.
There were no web searches on how to clean up a crime scene.
I don't recall at all seeing how to clean up a crime scene, no.
The prosecution rested their case on March the 17th, the 13th day of the trial, and the defense began bringing in their witnesses. The first created a significant stir for the prosecutors. The defense brought back Washington, Zachariah's previous cellmate. The defense attempted to prove that Washington chose to testify to help get himself out of prison sooner. Like the video of Zachariah signaling his daughter, the defense accused the prosecution of doing something similar with this witness.
Drama in this Kenosha County courtroom boiled down to one piece of video.
This is the trial for the man accused of killing his ex's boyfriend. Bill Miston shows us the argument over whether the district attorney was trying to influence a witness.
Die.
That's the testimony Marquand Washington gave last week. He says that's what he heard Zachariah Anderson say in his sleep while they were housed in the Kenosha County Jail. Video of that exchange became part of the defense's case, accusing DA Michael Gravely of witness coaching by mouthing the words during direct examination.
It seems fertile grounds for cross-examination. It's compelling, and that's why people sent it to us.
This kind of accusation is poisonous to this proceeding.
Washington was allowed to review the video outside of the jury before resuming his testimony. The video appears to show Gravely mouthing the words shortly after Washington said them, what Gravely argued, though Schrader said it appeared to show Gravely said the words simultaneously.
And that's where you took your cue?
No.
When I was asking you questions, did you have an independent memory?
Yes.
And did you get any assistance from me in either remembering that or testifying about that at all?
No.
Upon Washington's statement that he does not recall seeing the prosecution mouthing a phrase to him for him to repeat, the defense stated that they had a recording of the trial from CourtTV that showed otherwise. Needless to say, the prosecution was not thrilled and argued to the best of their ability to prevent the video from being played in court, but to no avail.
In any fashion, it's not been
Well,
disclosed.
the question was whether it would refresh his recollection, which would ordinarily not be, would just be for the witness to observe.
Well,
whether it would refresh his recollection.
in the context of asking, they explained what it was. I assume the purpose of that was to let the jury know what the item was. So I would object to the phrasing of it. And again, we've had no notice of this. This is not an item that's ever been disclosed.
Well, yeah, I hate to do this. Please don't talk about the case during the break. But the question actually is, would it refresh his recollection, which would ordinarily not be something that would be seen by the jury anyway. And I didn't know whether there had been an answer or not from the witness. Quiet. Huh? No answer. So he hasn't answered. As far as there being no notice, I mean, how much notice can you have had? It just has come up.
Has it just come up?
Well,
they haven't told us that. They have taken the time to do a subpoena.
Well, when would they have gotten the video?
Well, this was last Thursday, Judge. We are now, that is 8 days ago.
Right.
So if this occurred last Thursday, counsel has not provided you any information about when that subpoena was done or what this is. We have a right to have notice of things that would ever be utilized as an exhibit or actually used for demonstrative purposes in court.
Well, we're not that point.
Well, okay.
Just for the record,
refresh his recollection.
For the record, the subpoena was yesterday, so I can.
Well, probably he would answer the question. I'm just proposing to add.
Well, the question is, if you saw a video of what he claims occurred, would that refresh your recollection on the question previous? Does that make any sense?
I'm not sure how it would refresh. I don't remember.
I said it's not. He doesn't know if it would refresh it or not.
So let's try, because it might.
He ended his remark by saying, "I don't remember." He's already said, "I didn't see that." So how do you refresh? Counsel, just for a second. How do you refresh someone's memory when they have said, "I didn't see that and I don't remember"?
Well, actually, the law on refreshment of recollection is that anything can refresh your recollection. whether the witness is familiar with it or not. I don't see the harm. I am going to look on too while he looks on it, and in case we get further into this.
Just so that the record is clear, I've just now been handed a copy of this. Rather than being handed a copy at some prior time, I've just at this moment been handed a copy of this item.
After the video, the prosecution cross-examined Washington to disprove the accusation that the defense was trying to make.
Did you and I go through the items that you had previously told myself and law enforcement at that previous meeting in January?
Yes.
And were there multiple people present for that meeting as well?
Yes.
Okay. And during that time period, the second meeting, did I ever use any phrase like that I would go to bat for you? Did I ever say anything, any even approaching that?
No.
In fact, you are a person who has a federal prosecutor involved in your case, correct?
Correct.
Are you aware of any ability I would have to directly impact your case?
No.
Is it your understanding that the way this would work is if you are honest in your testimony that your attorney would let the federal prosecutor know and they would make a decision on your case?
Correct.
Do you think that I am in any way a decision maker on what happens next in your case?
No.
Now, you were asked if something refreshed your memory, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And what was your perception of what you saw?
Sound like you was repeating what you already knew I was pretty much finna say after I had started saying it.
So you were saying something, and I was saying those words after I heard you?
Correct.
Now, you were asked several questions about, time you've been in prison and in the jail. Have you ever been a person who informed on individuals previous to this time?
No.
And have you informed on anyone else in this federal prosecution case other than Mr. Anderson?
I object. What's the possible relevance of this? This is exactly what he was seeking to keep out.
And was, go ahead.
Shame on me for not interrupting sooner. Rephrase your question.
You testified in Racine on a case you were an eyewitness to, correct?
Correct.
And other than that, have you provided any information to law enforcement about any other cases?
No.
No?
No.
Were you housed with individuals charged with first-degree homicide named Renan Brownlee? Was he somebody you were housed with at some time?
Yes.
Did you ever inform on him?
No.
Objection. Same objection, Judge. How is this possibly relevant?
Sustained.
After Washington stepped down from the witness stand, the defense brought their next witness, another inmate who claimed to know Zachariah and Washington, Nicholas Ryan McAtee. The defense hoped McAtee's testimony would also disprove Washington's testimony.
Housed in the segregation unit, where was he in relation to you?
I was upstairs in the far corner in cell 22. He was directly across me. Essentially, he was giving me advice because one of the things that we talked about with our federal cases that we're facing so much time. And one of the ways he said that if you want to get out of your case, the easy thing to do is to just jump on someone else's case. And I had heard the term before, but he clarified and told me more about how to go about doing that.
And did you ask him about, to explain that more to you? About how he did it or what his thinking process?
I didn't ask him. He was volunteering his method, I guess you could call it. And he told me what he did. And, he found out information about people's cases and whether it was going through their discovery or just asking them or seeing stuff in the news or newspaper and using that to put himself into it by informing detectives that he had information. And
did he say what he would do if he didn't know something about the case?
He would make something up. He said, as far as he was concerned, it was his life or someone else's, and he said, you know, he would do that to save himself.
So, returning to the topic of you, there was some potential mention of you testifying for the prosecution.
Yes.
However, the prosecution was quick to show that McAtee's testimony had zero value to the case because of his dishonest behavior while in prison, which included falsifying legal documents to receive drugs through the mail.
And did you go to the computer in the area where inmates can do legal work and put together some legal documents and a legal envelope that was created so that it could be sent back to the jail for a local Kenosha attorney to be the individual who sent the drugs?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And so you created what you knew was not a truthful piece of mail, right?
Yes.
And there was an actual lawyer's name on it, correct?
Yes.
And the idea was to utilize that document, that legal document, to bring additional drugs into the jail.
Yes.
Okay. And did you recruit a individual who was a cellmate of yours to be a part of that?
Yes.
And did that and so were you detected in doing that after the other incident had already occurred?
Yes.
For the records, that was 3 minutes.
Let's wrap it up. And that's directed to all 5 of you. You haven't said a word, nor have to wrap it up.
Wrap up cross-examination total? Is that what you mean?
No, I mean let's move along.
Back and forth, the case dragged on for 15 days, which spanned into a nearly 4-week-long trial. It finally came to an end on March the 21st, with both parties giving their closing arguments.
It is betrayed by that speck of blood of Rosalio Gutierrez. It's betrayed by the electronics, and it's betrayed by the defendant's own lies.
Prosecutors focused on DNA, pictures, folders, phone records showing Zachariah Anderson was tracking and even going to Rosalio Gutierrez's Kenosha apartment before he disappeared, and denials to law enforcement when police came knocking days later.
Here is his opportunity by telling the whole and total truth to clear himself.
The state highlighted missing carpet from the van and remains of a bleach bottle and burned clothing in a fire pit, tens of thousands and recently withdrawn cash for a supposed escape fund, and no activity on Anderson's phone when police believe Gutierrez was killed.
What are the chances that in this exact square foot on the planet Earth, a man who's innocent and falsely accused would have the blood of the man who died on May 17th? How could that happen?
In their opinions, that this was blood.
And despite all the searches, no body's been found.
With all of that effort focused on one person, and the fact that they didn't find any of that should tell you they've got the wrong guy.
The defense says investigators put on blinders and ignored other possibilities.
He's making the absence of evidence seem like something significant. So if you're not doing anything on your phone, that's apparently evidence of guilt.
The state countered. Gutierrez didn't have a chance in the, quote, blitz attack. Why? Anderson's ex was moving on.
Sadie Beacham was done, and the defendant wasn't. And he was losing control and jealous.
The jury deliberated for almost 10 hours, mulling over the vast amount of information they had received over the past 4 weeks. They had to decide whether there was enough evidence that had been presented to convict Zachariah of Rosalio's death and therefore spend the rest of his life in prison, or to have his name cleared and walk out of the courtroom a free man. On Wednesday, March the 22nd, everyone returned to the courtroom to hear the jury's decision.
The jury finds the defendant, Zachariah Anderson, guilty of intentional homicide of the first degree as charged. As to the fourth count of the information, we, the jury, find the defendant, Zachariah Anderson, guilty of hiding a corpse as charged.
It was an emotional moment in the courtroom as everyone heard the verdict. except for Zachariah, who kept a stone-faced expression as he learned his fate, was handcuffed and escorted out of the courtroom. Zachariah is currently set to receive his sentence on March the 16th of 2023. To this day, no traces of Rosalio Gutierrez Jr.'s remains have ever been recovered. Rosalio's loved ones may have to console themselves with the knowledge that even though they may never be able to put Rosalio's body to rest, his killer is behind bars. If you found this case compelling, please like the video, comment down below with your take on it, and please subscribe to the channel. And don't forget, we have a second channel called the Beyond Evil Podcast, where we present video versions of our podcast. It's all new stories with new information. It's well worth checking out. Just look under the Channels tab. Also, hit the notification bell before you leave to stay up to date each time we reveal a new shocking case. Until next time, stay safe and keep your eyes peeled. You never know what's lurking in the shadows.